You're listening in on an animated discussion about Batman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from thecinematropolis.com. And today's topic is Season 2, Episode 5, House and Garden. Joshua, listen, I'm a little disturbed. I feel like I just walked out of a really dark, twisted H.P. Lovecraft novel. And I know we've made that comparison with Ivy before, but whoa, this is nightmare fuel.
It's fantastic what they do with this episode with like these weird plant monsters, but that House and Garden really goes hard for the horror feel. But in this case, it's like domestic horror. It's so bizarre. It's such a wild choice.
I can't believe, I know we've said this before for a multitude of reasons, but this is another one of those, wow, I can't believe this is a children's television show episodes.
It's really interesting. We come from Avatar, where we say that like that end scene is legitimately terrifying and maybe was aimed a little high for the lower end of your 8 to 13 audience. Whereas this one, the horror elements are definitely there, but the monster is almost a little goofy, like to look at, like his malformed, a little more cartoonish.
Right.
But the themes going on in this one are definitely not 8 to 13-year-old. I don't want to say they're not appropriate. It's more like they just won't get them, you know?
Well, we're really channeling the horror, sci-fi horror, sci-fi horror genre a little harder than I would expect on Batman the Animated Series. But let's, before we get too far, Joshua, of course, we've got to talk about the title card.
I like that we talked a little bit about the themes of the episode because I think the themes of the episode are in the title card.
I agree.
I think this is an A+ title card that most people would sleep on.
I agree, actually. I have loved this title card, A++. I think this is excellent. Communicates kind of what we're going to expect from the episode. Has some of the themes visually represented there. I think this is definitely one of the better ones we've had in the last 10 episodes or so.
Oh, definitely, and it's definitely one of the best ones. We've had kind of a rash of real questionable or at least mediocre choices. But this one is just saying so much about this episode. Mm-hmm. This childlike chalk drawing of the family in front of the house with it's total Leave It to Beaver by way of a 5-year-old chalk drawing, but with this big neon ivy just looming over the whole thing. She's in the picture as mom,
right?
But she's also this terrifying presence.
Exactly. She's in the background, but also larger than everything else in the frame. And but also kind of
that kind of like she is the shadow over Innsmouth kind of thing, where it's like, oh no, whatever's going on in this domestic scene that I am part of, I'm also going to wreck it. I'm also going to eventually destroy it with my mere presence. Only 90% of the episode, you don't understand how. Like, it takes that long for that dread to come to fruition.
I have to say, yes, really strong core mystery, actually, because that's the thing. We're all watching this. We're saying, oh, there's no way.
We know the
deal. Second they're like, oh, Ivy's out of Arkham. She's reformed and married. You're like, married, huh? Okay, sure. And then you go and you meet the dad with the 2 boys. You're like,
who seems amazing.
Yes.
Like again, not knowing where this episode is going and having him talk about, I know about her past, but I'm also a clinical psychologist. So I both know emotionally and intellectually that she has made a break from that previous life. Like, it sounds too good to be true.
Exactly.
And it is.
It is.
But it's also the thing that, like, if we were hoping for one of these villains to reform,
I think Ivy's one of the ones that seems the most apt to go reform, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, her deal is understandable, right?
Yeah,
More so now than even in the mid 90s, right? Like let's maybe stop burning the world down.
Let's not burn the world down. Let's protect Mother Nature. And she just was so passionate about it that she did enough experiments with it.
If she could co-prioritize human beings with plants, then she would be fine. And interestingly enough, she does that in this episode also with these like plant-animal hybrid clones.
Literally.
She literally co-prioritizes them.
Yeah, like I put that. If she only did that, so she did that literally, as in she melded their DNA together.
And it's kind of interesting. We talk about this, especially in terms of the trial, that all of these people would have been horrible, perhaps just less theatrically without Batman, right? But they would still be mass murderers, terrorists.
I mean, an eco-terrorist is just as much a terrorist, you know, I mean...
No,
you know
absolutely. I mean, that's Raish's deal too, right? Just globally. And what I think is that tragic flaw that will always bring them down. What's interesting is, out loud, I just say, if she could just co-prioritize human life and plant life, she would reform, except she literally did it in this episode, and it just got worse.
It got worse. Well, I think it's interesting because it does show us a side of Poison Ivy that we have not seen before, where
we've seen it a little, but we'll get to it.
Okay,
Go on.
Sure. Well, I'm just saying...
No, you're right. So please, by all means, finish that thought, and then just put the pin in. But we have seen a taste of it, and it's fascinating.
Well, so there's two things. One, that she actually does crave human interaction in a family.
Yeah,
you know,
yes.
I know it sounds domestic, and of course, we've talked about the gender politics and the way gender is presented in the show is kind of problematic at best.
It vacillates. Sometimes it's amazing. Your Barbara Gordon's your Batgirl. Sometimes it's less so. A girl, or
any of the Catwoman stuff, a girl. But I think it's interesting. My knee-jerk reaction was like, oh, of course they're going to make her settle down to be just kind of like a stay-at-home mom. But the way they do it is actually really interesting because it shows that she does have her nurturing side, something we have seen before. She nurtures her plants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like there's a mothering aspect to her already. It's just we've only seen it in this realm of madness. My baby's looking at this, greenhouse full of plants. So it's not out of nowhere. It's just sort of redirected. And also, like, I think it's worth saying, here we are in modern feminism. That means a woman can do whatever she wants.
Right.
So if what she decides she wants to do is
be domestic,
be a mother to these children, that is also a laudable goal, especially when it's an adoption. They're not your children. It's a blended family. All that stuff is even more on point as positive in 2019 than it even would have been when it came on. God bless her if that's what she wants, and it really does for most of the episode look like what she wants.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think by the time we get to the end of it, and I know we're going to go through the episode, but I do think we saw that maybe what she wants is just the same thing a lot of people want.
Yeah,
it just happens to be a domestic family with Harley Quinn.
So, okay, and that's the fascinating bit. So let's go ahead. We'll just keep on Poison Ivy because there's other interesting stuff going on in this episode, but Poison Ivy is, of course, the thematic linchpin that holds it all together. And she is both the person in the domestic situation and the monster that wrecks her own domestic situation.
Right.
Like, it's so fascinating to me how this episode puts together a domestic horror when the person who's in the domestic horror is also creating the domestic horror. Like, this should not work.
Right.
This really shouldn't work. But because she so convinces Batman, like he never quite commit to her reformation.
Right.
But she's almost convinced, and he wants to be convinced, and she almost does it. So we kind of ride on his shoulder instead of hers. And to watch this domestic situation fall apart.
Right. Well, no, it is really fascinating because that's the whole thing. We are really looking at this from Batman's perspective, where we are just waiting. We know there's something.
We're waiting for the shoe to
drop.
We're
waiting. We don't know, but it's a good 2/3 of the episode or more where you're just like, you know what? I don't know what's going on. Maybe I even thought for a second, I said, well, maybe there's actually another villain we haven't seen. We've seen him show up, later that is actually driving this plant robbery of the wealthy.
Sure. I mean, if you're going to go for the wide DC bench, which BTAS has done before and will do again, especially when we start getting into, the DCAU will, certainly with like Justice League Unlimited and stuff like that. But there are other plant people. This could have been a blind,
right?
Well,
and I think about the way that they've done a lot of misleads with the Mad Hatter. We've talked about it a couple different times. I was like, where you think it's one thing, and actually it's Mad Hatter episode. So it's like, I thought, maybe we think it's a Poison Ivy episode, but actually it's something else. But the truth was far more disturbing than I expected.
Yeah, and I think when we're riding along with Batman, I mean, speaking for myself at least, we're genre savvy. We know that the shoe is going to drop, or maybe not. Like, we're wondering, but we're also like, no, I'm pretty sure that they don't reform Poison Ivy.
No, exactly. Yeah, we know she comes back in other episodes. Yeah,
we want it for her. I mean, Batman wants it for her.
Yeah.
He wants to believe. We've talked about the inherent optimism, honestly, in I'm still going to work for a city that doesn't need Batman. Also, I'm going to get up every day and be Batman.
Well, no, he does that. He
wants her to reform.
Right. And he's just so close to buying it too, because he's scoped her out. They've watched her house. He can't find any way to trace these crimes directly to her. And you think he's about to buy it, and he wants it for her. We want it too. It'd be nice to see on a Batman animated series, see like one of these villains actually turn coat and go straight, you know? And we don't really see that very often, especially not with any of your big headliner,
No.
tier 1 villains.
Yeah, definitely not. And so we've said that we wanted it for her, Batman wants it for her, and much to our surprise, in our final scene with Poison Ivy, we discover maybe she also wants it for her.
I think she does.
Because she's got this photo album, and some of it is wedding pictures of her and her plant monster, which, whatever, she's unhinged, we get it. But
right next to a picture of her and Harley.
And a thing that I did not realize, I didn't even think about until you and I were just discussing off mic before we started this episode, is that while Ivy and Harley were definitely being the lesbian queens of crime, they were also kind of living a little bit of a domestic lifestyle when they weren't doing that.
Exactly. Well, we saw it. We had the whole, they were making breakfast for each other sort of thing, waking up in the morning, drinking coffee, you know.
In a very white picket fence. I mean, look, it's Poison Acres. Nobody else, they had no neighbors and all that stuff, but they were living in a Leave It to Beaver house.
Yes.
In a Leave It to Beaver neighborhood.
Right.
Together. And it's like, wow, I think she wants both.
She wants a
domestic life that's also lesbian queens of crime.
I'm just saying, based on the through line we've seen so far, I think she wants to simultaneously have a domestic life where her job is being a criminal.
Where her job is being a super criminal.
Yeah.
And if her best friend and lover can also be her coworker, all the better.
It's like, that's the dream.
And so in that moment,
and she also wants to have babies. She wants to have children.
Yeah.
You're like,
and she's kind of filled that space. I mean, so again, this is worth saying that like women can. This is the point of feminism: is women can be whatever they want to be. But it is, the more you look at it, you realize that there is this like mothering, nurturing side to Poison Ivy, which is very unexpected in a femme fatale character.
Yeah.
That's really out of nowhere, except it's not. It's been there since minute one.
Right.
We just didn't notice because it was so misplaced to these plants.
To plants.
But it's there. This mothering, this nurturing. I want to take care of some life that I bring into the world. She just has very specific ideas about how that should happen.
Exactly. Well, and she's still working this thing when we encounter her in this episode, and the truth has been revealed that she's building these children in her greenhouse basement with genetic materials. Woo! But you see
From the actual professor guy.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
He's also like tied up in the basement.
Oh, yeah. She's siphoning off his blood in order for the genetic material. Oh, boy. Yeah, it's some Lovecraftian, crazy splice level stuff. But, I mean, it's like she's trying to work out the bugs, right? She's like, okay, so you guys only live for a few days or a few hours. Well, we'll get there.
Okay, can we talk about how that was for me? At least for me, the idea that every time we saw her husband on screen, it was a different plant monster.
Yes.
And
Correct.
so every time we saw a plant, the actual monster, it was a different monster. And every time we saw the kids, it was different kids because they only live a few days.
Yep.
It's like she just had to keep churning them out so that she always had this family, and at the end is the enforcer. And I was just like, oh my God, what must it be like for her to want some version of this life, 2, to have created some version of this life, and 3, for her to have to continuously watch it be born and die 3 times a week in order to keep the illusion up.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly she did it. She pulled it off. But what must that have been like to go from mother to wife to mastermind to widow?
Right.
With basically the same being over the course of a few days, over and over and over. Wow.
It's pretty upsetting.
There's some darkness underneath
There's
this
some
thing.
darkness. And also, he had me sitting here thinking, this is another conversation. You have me sitting here thinking about how hard a lot of stay-at-home moms have to work to keep up the illusion that their family's happy when they're really not sometimes.
Being a stay-at-home parent myself,
right.
Or now the pressure of social media to hold up a facade of perfection, if not actual happiness, right? Like I'm a stay-at-home parent and I always have it together.
And not only do you have it together, it's the best version of this life.
Tightest package. Yeah.
So I mean, I just think relate
No,
when
that's
you
fascinating.
talk about the pressure to keep the illusion up. Now, obviously, for her that means churning through these
Sure,
like
it's
children,
very
which is
different,
very
but you're
sad.
not wrong.
But I mean, that's a lot of work, right?
Man,
You know?
yeah.
So
it's a lot of additional work. Like it's a lot of work. I mean, anyone who's lived in a family situation, whatever that means, like living with your parents, with close friends as roommates, with a significant other, and then with children, maybe wherever you're at, that family unit living is already a great deal of work just to make it work at all, like just to keep that engine running in a mostly healthy manner. And then if you want to throw on a veneer of nigh perfection, that's just like into the red zone. Just lay the accelerator on the floor on that family engine. And yeah, that's another element of domestic horror,
right.
Really.
Well, Joshua, being a stay-at-home parent yourself, I really appreciate you bringing that perspective, because that was, as we're talking, I'm like, man, that's a lot of work, because she basically is a single stay-at-home parent.
Yeah.
You're a married stay-at-home parent, and that's a lot of work.
Who also is maintaining a job.
Exactly.
Of criminal mastermind.
Exactly. Through podcasts.
Well,
comic book scholar.
I'm a non-criminal mastermind of podcasts. And she is a criminal mastermind of whatever. But yes.
Wait, do you have an enterprise you're running out of your house? Can I get in on this action? That's what I just heard.
You're doing it right now, my friend. You're in it. It's worth saying also that I understand very much this, and you are right that is a layer of commentary, social commentary, that was not in existence in the mid-90s, because there was always a pressure on parents to always look like they have it together. But social media has morphed that somewhat.
It's amped it up.
And it really has. And I want to say, so that I don't take more credit than is due to me, this is one of the places where my male privilege actually saved me a little bit. I was already so weird 11, 12 years ago as a stay-at-home dad, and I don't have the same pressures on me societally that women do. I never felt that level of I must look perfect all the time, because I was already kind of so weird. And it's just a different expectation. Like, when are you going back to work was the question for me. But most of the parents that I sort of co-parented with on playdates and stuff were moms, were women. Vicariously, I get it. Like, it was not a pressure I felt very often.
They gotta do it like I mean,
but I heard it.
You talk about Leave It to Beaver. I mean, you gotta be like
you gotta look like June Cleaver.
June Cleaver,
in the year
yeah,
of our
that's
Lord
right.
2019.
Yeah.
But not for a half an hour at a time, for every Instagram post, for every Facebook post.
Yep.
And there's a whole other conversation that I would be prepared to have about how much you want to maintain that illusion versus how real you want to be. Because you know what? I'm not as real in my social media spaces as I am with, my family and friends. Mm-hmm. But there's just a fantastic parallel between the life that Ivy is living here and the life of like stay-at-home parents at all.
Yeah.
Wow.
Deep stuff, man. This
unexpected, BTAS. Unexpected.
This episode is so many layers of unexpected, because we just talked about all that, but underneath all of it, it's still like a splice. And that's clones. Yes. Okay. And that's another conversation. I'm not sure I want to get into that just for the sake of time. But
okay, here's what I want to say about clones, and it may open a door for you.
Sure.
I was overjoyed to discover that Batman the Animated Series understands cloning better than all of the Marvel Universe, because the real professor's children are grown daughters, but you can't make female clones from male donors.
Boom.
And hi, X-23, who is somehow a female clone of Wolverine. I'm just saying, it's fine. I actually like X-23. I like how she turns out. I like that she is a girl Wolverine. Like, that's a really interesting space. It was just so fascinating to me that 15 years before she shows up, BTAS was like, not only do we understand how cloning works a little better, we're going to make it one of the clues in the mystery. Man. Awesome.
Such a great mystery, man. It's like right there in front of your eyes the whole time. No, I just wanted to say that we were really obsessed. But you guys, you remember before 9/11 happened? I mean, and not to bring up
before,
but like the stuff we were dealing with in the 90s is radically different. And I just see like things like cloning and genetic modification.
Yeah.
Like all those things were very prevalent in a lot of the superhero science fiction, all of the different types of fiction out there. These were ideas we were wrestling with. And seeing it in this episode just reminded me, I was like, man, we're all about cloning being a real big fear in the 90s, because we also see it in Spider-Man, the animated series.
Well, we've seen it with Man-Bat on this very
on the
show.
Yep.
We've seen a lot of that here.
Yeah.
Mr. Freeze, to a certain extent, like, is not a genetic modification, but it is a little bit of like body horror.
Yeah.
That he lives in this cage of cold. You know what? As we say this, things that are sort of circling back around to us in slightly different ways, or in very different ways in 2019, we are worried about genetic manipulation again.
Yes.
And it's mostly in terms of plant life right now.
Right.
And look at this. Poison Ivy is supervillain Monsanto as opposed to regular villain Monsanto that we have in the real world. Like in this episode, she is genetically manipulating plants for her own weird ends. At least she's not asking us to eat them.
Ooh.
Boy, that would be a real additional level of horror.
So all
this episode.
This episode was a clear. They were very forward thinking in the writers' room. I've just got to say, apparently, because they're talking about a lot of stuff that is still very relevant today for sure. Wow, Joshua, we were kind of all over the place in this particular episode, but I feel like we hit on most of the high points here. Did you have any other areas of the episode that you wanted to hit on before we wrap up?
I had one moment that I felt very negative about.
Oh, sure.
But it's very much a moment, right? And I've mentioned before that I do not love millionaire playboy Bruce Wayne.
Oh, yes.
And in this episode, we got Dick Grayson, millionaire playbaby, and I didn't love it.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's only a moment, and it's not a bad scene in and of itself, except we're never going to see this girl again, and it's difficult. Maybe nobody else did this. Maybe you didn't do this, but it's really hard for me to look at that scene and not see Dick picking up some of Bruce's worse fake habits.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, they're fake habits for Bruce Wayne, but you have a child
that he's
your
picking
house,
up on. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, again, now I'm talking as a dad, where it's like, if I had to fake some of these bad habits, how do I make my 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old understand that those are fake bad habits and that we're not making them real bad habits?
And they're actually bad habits.
Like, that's why I'm faking it. But where's the nuance there for 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old? And what does that mean for... So it's a little subtextual in a way, but it's a thing that stood out to me. I don't like it. It's a reflection of something I'm already on record as not loving.
You don't like that? Well, I mean, that is part of the Playboy illusion.
Yeah, which I think, we can go ahead and do away with. And it's interesting that Robin is another example, that watching Dick Grayson in real life as an 18, 19-year-old is another reason that I had not until this moment thought of for Bruce Wayne to stop doing that act. Like, let's just stop.
Let it go. Yeah, that was kind of a weird moment. It was interesting to see Dick in kind of his university setting. We haven't seen a lot of that on the show.
It's true.
I know
if we do, it's for like 10 seconds to
seconds.
just set up the mystery of what that's going to happen on campus.
Yes, definitely.
In this case, we actually got a little slice of life, and I hate it.
What I'm hearing you say, Joshua, is that you think the fake Playboy Dick Grayson is kind of a jerk.
Yes, except I'm also worried he's not fake. And it's worth saying, comic book Dick Grayson is actually a very sexually active member of the DC universe.
Oh, yeah.
But the way that he became that was actually pretty respectful of women at large, considering the time, and because this has been going on for 30 years at this point, that he's been evolving from Boy Wonder to Nightwing, who is a well-known leadership figure in the DCU and has also dated a lot of super ladies. But he's been largely depicted as a very respectful partner in those relationships. So to just get this glimpse, and I'm just like, yeah.
So Joshua, I think our big takeaway here is don't be a dick.
So on the note of that spectacular gem of wisdom, is this a must-watch episode?
I think so. I think this is a fantastic episode. I think it's really weird, but also, man, I mean, look, all the stuff we just talked about, this episode has a lot of layers to it, from the character work to the themes to the sci-fi horror. Like, there's a lot of weird stuff happening, coming together in a very unusual way, but I think it makes for a really special, one-of-a-kind episode that I think is an essential viewing for a Batman the Animated Series rewatch.
I agree with you. I think that what's amazing to me as I go through this series is that so many of these episodes that don't get the love on the top 10 lists, what are the odds that House and Garden is going to make somebody's top 10 BTAS list? But it for real might make my top 10 list. It's so good and so layered. And it's layered in the mid 90s and it's layered in a different way in 2019.
Agreed.
There's just a lot to talk about. I love the optimism of Batman. I love the domestic desire of Ivy that she wants to marry with her criminal life, literally in the form of Harley Quinn. I ship it. Must watch. Sit down, watch this episode. Write papers about this episode. Think hard about this episode.
Think hard about it. Okay, on that note, I just want to say a lot of times the top 10 lists are very often occupied by origin stories, with villain origin stories.
True.
For good reason, they're fantastic.
They do really good jobs on those.
They do. But what I will say is we've gotten so far. We're in season, I guess technically season 2 now.
Yes.
Since they've changed the seasons. But we're very far into Batman the Animated Series at this point.
We're 40 plus episodes into an animated discussion and something like, I think, 50 or 60 episodes of the show as a whole.
Yes. So one of the benefits of that is that we can now tell very different types of stories with characters we already know. We don't have to
established it.
Yeah. So I think that. So if I would say if I was making a top 10 villain origin story episode list, this would definitely be up there, and hopefully other people out there can start to look at these episodes a little more frequently. But on that note, Joshua, as always, we're going to close out the show with some other recommendations for listeners who think this is a great episode as well and want to keep that idea rolling. So what is another media recommendation you would throw at our listeners today?
I am going to suggest 1975's Stepford Wives.
Yes.
I mean, a classic piece of domestic horror, right? And I mean, there is a novel also that I have not read, so I cannot suggest the novel in good conscience, but I probably should read it. And I am going to go with 1975 Stepford Wives because the I believe 2013 remake, not spectacular.
It's just okay.
And
actually, that was when I watched the first. I haven't watched it in a long time. I'm now concerned that the gender. I bet the gender. And the new one, I have concerns about how the way they portray gender in that movie work out, and I haven't watched it in like a solid 10 years. So
yeah, it's worth saying that the gender politics of 1975s are not less messed up, but they are sort of more understandable in the framework of 1975 or even earlier for the novel. So I'm a little loath to say anything about the actual plot of the Stepford Wives because I think I said 2013 before. It was actually 2004. I don't know why I said 2013. 2004 remake. Not great. Not a lot of people saw it. If you don't know the story of Stepford Wives, go watch it. But just know it's a domestic horror. It's a question of gender roles. It's a question of what are the horrifying and illogical ends that we will take gender roles to. And I feel like, much like this episode of BTAS, there's sort of an additional layer of conversation that we could have even about this 45-year-old version of this story.
Excellent. I think Stepford Wives is a great pick, Joshua. So I've got 3, and they're all about cloning. I recently watched a video essay, and it made me really rethink my position on Michael Bay as a director, who has made a series of very trash films that I absolutely despise, and not just the Transformers films, although those are also trash. Mostly, the first one's okay. The rest of them are trash, and not counting Bumblebee, which is actually pretty good. But one movie that Michael Bay did where I feel like he was trying to stretch himself as a director and experiment with science fiction in a way that I found to be fascinating was The Island from 2005, starring Ewan McGregor and Jessica Alba. I mean, it's not an A+ movie, but there's a lot of cool stuff going on there.
And also stuff's going to explode behind them while the interesting themes are going
Exactly. On. It's like every time you're like, here's an idea, but boom, right behind you. But
I don't hate the idea of Michael Bay doing smart movies with big themes and also still blowing everything up.
I'm okay with that.
I am a market for that thing, I think.
I can be behind that. He's made some good movies too. Pain and Gain, not really relevant to this episode in any way. I think it's a good movie though. Another one that I really like, Christopher Nolan fans, I think one of his best films actually is The Prestige, starring Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. I kind of just spoiled the movie a little bit, but hey, go watch it. Just go watch.
You've talked about that one before in terms of stage magic.
Stage magic
with Zatanna, so we probably spoiled it all already.
Okay, well, have I already said that one? You can cut that.
No, but not in terms of clones. So tell me, clones? We'll just leave it at that. Move on.
The last one I want to throw out there is a much lesser known, lesser appreciated sci-fi film from, I want to say, either the late 90s or early 2000s, starring Ethan Hawke and Jude Law, called Gattaca.
Yeah.
Which is all about like the dangers of experimenting with genetics and making that like a norm in our society and culture.
Not just a norm, but requirements?
I mean, if you want to actually live a quality life, you better be a genetically experimented on baby. I'll just put it that way, because everyone who's not genetically experimented on is going to be treated like a second-class citizen. Oh, man, that's a great movie.
Speaking of things that may have an additional new layer of meaning in 2019, Gattaca is an inspired pick. Well, that about wraps up this animated discussion. Caleb, where can people go to continue the conversation with you?
Well, Joshua, you can always find me on Twitter talking about film, television, video games, and all sorts of other pop culture goodness at C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. I'm also the editor-in-chief and film critic at the Cinematropolis, and we publish these in-depth essays on all types of different films, oftentimes including science fiction and superhero films, all the stuff you'd want to read about. And you can find all of these articles at thecinematropolis.com. Joshua, what about you?
I'm also most active on Twitter, where you can find me easily enough at Joshua Unruh. And remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions.
So make sure to join us in our next animated discussion when we talk about Season 2, Episode 7, Harlequinade.
Until next time, we'll see you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel.